Welcome to Beyond Sport with Fiona Stewart. In this podcast, I chat to athletes, coaches, and industry professionals about their sporting journey and the lessons they've learned along the way. Guests range from Olympians to the everyday lover of sport, but the message stays the same. There is so much more to sport than what meets the eye. Make sure you hit subscribe on Apple Podcasts or follow on Spotify so you don't miss the release of each new episode. You can also find us on Facebook and Instagram at Beyond Sport with Fiona Stewart. I'd love to hear from you. Welcome to part 2 of my chat with Cam Elliott, the amazing performance coach who looks beyond the athlete to the human standing in front of him. If you haven't listened to part 1, hit pause and go listen to that now. This episode will be waiting for you when you come back. In this episode, we chat about the lessons Cam has learnt along the way, as well as an interesting perspective on the future of sport. In particular, the place of performance-enhancing drugs in sport. That's enough for me, let's get into it. Is there another lesson that you've learnt along your journey that you'd like to share?
Another lesson, because I mean, how much time have we got? There's a lot of lessons I've learned, but you know, a lot of lessons that I've learned are from failing, and failing is great, I think. So maybe that's the lesson in itself, is that you'll only learn something when you lose, when you fail. When you win, you don't learn anything. It validates something you already know. And that's that your ego thinks it's the best, and it thinks it's the most unique snowflake in the snowstorm. When you lose, you get a reality check, self versus self, that says, hey, you're not better than someone at something. And you have two options. You can sit down and cry about it and go, oh, I'm the worst. Or you can say, hey, I'm going to go and ask that person to show me how they did that. Then you get better. That's how you get better. You only get better by losing, by failing. You can't appreciate a win until you've had a loss. If all you do is win forever, it just validates that you're the best at something. And I feel like that is a great lesson to teach, not just athletes, everyone, but especially athletes, you know.
At the simplest form of that, like I'm thinking, okay, as a swim teacher, which I've been doing for 10 plus years now, you get the kids, whether, you know, I've coached state athlete as well as learn to swim babies, you do that little micro dose of failure to go, well, actually, you don't know everything yet. Like, let's keep working towards this.
The only difference is that yours is a much more high stakes environment where if they fail, they might drown. So you're like, how do I not let this person drown, but also fail in the pool?
I know exactly how to. I have my methods, and it depends on the kid.
Oh, beautiful.
But like,
and you've also got first aid to fall back on, I guess.
Yeah. But for example, like I'll be in the pool with a little kid that will be super confident on the steps or the platform where they can stand, but the pool depth is not their height. And I'll go, okay, well, you swim out to me if you think you can. And they'll usually go, don't touch me, I can do it. And I'll be like, great, no worries. I'll either take away a noodle or take a step back. And I'll be like, off you go. And then they'll come up. I'll have to grab them up, not off the bottom, but like their face goes in for a second or two. And you're like, oh, look, well done. You had a go, but you didn't do it by yourself, did you? You need a little bit of help right now. So that's why you need to listen or stay on the steps. Little things like that.
No, that's good. That's perfect. Yeah. And we can take that as a great example about another thing that I use for myself, not for other people, because this would sound cruel. I love to leverage fear as a learning tool for myself. And I'm always leaning into things that I'm either scared of or that make me uncomfortable, which I got from getting up on stage. I had a crippling public speaking fear. And then I got up on stage and people were like, how can you act on stage but not speak in public? And it took me a long time to realize that it's because when I'm on stage, I'm not myself. So then I started doing some more presenting and I realized, oh man, I'm presenting stuff that I already know. So I shouldn't be afraid. If I'm afraid or nervous, it's because I don't know what I'm talking about. And that put the onus back on myself. So that if I'm nervous before a public speaking event, I would stop and say, you know what you're talking about? And if I said no, I'd be like, oh shit, I'm in trouble. But if I've never said that. I would always say, yes, I know what I'm talking about. Well, great. Then if you know what you're talking about, you're the expert they're here to speak to or that they're here to listen to. So just tell them something, just give them something to play with. If everyone here knows this already, then awesome. Then you're not teaching them anything and there's no stake. If a few people want to learn something really cool about, great, then there's less stakes, but there's at least something at stake. If everyone here has never heard of these concepts before, then you better make sure you know how to explain this so well that everyone here leaves having the understanding of the principles. And when I put that kind of responsibility on myself, it became less about being afraid of the thing, which was public speaking, and more about the responsibility, that leadership quality of ensuring everyone understood what I was talking about before I left. And everything went away. I was like, oh, I'm not scared of talking to people. I'm scared of not teaching them properly. So then when I started understanding that, I was like, well, fuck, just make sure you know it. If you know it, then you're not going to make the mistake of not teaching someone. If someone asks you a question you can't answer, you simply say, hey, I actually don't have an answer for that right now, but let's come back to that later. Like you leverage those moments to keep people confident in your ability, but just don't bullshit about it. So I leverage that level of fear for myself. And that's what you're doing there with those kids. You're saying, hey, if you're confident, show me. Don't tell me, show me. And I do that with my athletes. Don't tell me, show me.
Yeah.
Because if all you're doing is telling me, one day someone's going to come along and show you that you're wrong. So show me that you can do it. Don't tell me. And then when they can't do it, I then catch them and say, hey, good effort. You did a good job. Let's do it better by maybe changing some things. And you're taking the fear of trying and failing away from them.
Yeah, that's it. And like, I think it's quite special. Like, I know it's a great tool because it sorts any issues out when they're like, I can do it. And they don't listen to you for 3 weeks in a row. And you're like, okay, let's do it then.
Let me drown this kid.
And I'm like, oh, mum, look, we're going to try this. And I've been telling them how to do it for the past, however many weeks. But then they get to have a go. They get to see that they failed. But then they get to learn from that and go, oh, okay, so if I put my head down, then my hips aren't going to sink and I'll be able to float, and then I can move from A to B easier. And it's just, simple things, but they wouldn't have known that if they hadn't have failed because they already thought they could do it.
Yeah. Failure is a great tool, one of the greatest tools that exists for us. And it's such a, if we're being real about failure, as humans, failure is such a low stake for us. In the animal kingdom, failure means that you're getting eaten by something. So I like to encourage people to understand that there aren't, some apex predator waiting for us outside to chase us to work. Sometimes I wish there was, because it really, it really opened people's eyes up to the world. But there's not an apex predator out there waiting to hunt you when you wake up and you don't have to sleep with one eye open. So when you go out and you say, I can't do it, I'm going to get it wrong. In my head, I'm rolling my eyes going, fuck me. It's not like there's some lion going to eat your ass alive.
If you get it wrong.
If you get this wrong, you'll just get it wrong and look a bit silly. And that's part of my personality as well. I like to be silly, to make people understand that there is nothing wrong with being vulnerable and looking silly. But people have to do it. They've got to try. If they don't try, then they won't do it. Simple. They will never get it if they don't try it. So you take the fear of failure away and they will try more. And the more they try, the better they get. If they try too much in one sitting, they burn themselves out. So then you teach them how to microdose, which is, coming back to the gearbox analogy, that's learning how to sit through gears 1, 2, and 3. If all they do is gear 4 and 5 all the time, they're going to burn out. And even when they compete, I teach people how to use gears 1, 2, and 3. If we use football or netball, field-based examples, how many of the best athletes in that game in Australia you see running and jumping at gears 4 and 5 for a whole game?
Yeah, they don't.
The best football players, man or woman, they spend all their time just moving from A to B, and they float from their A zone to their B zone, and they're just waiting for their moment to strike. They're the apex predator, ready to just tear someone's ass up. But everyone else around them is running like headless chooks. I watch that in the AFL. I'm like, some of these players get paid hundreds of thousands of dollars a year, and they're running around like headless chooks. It's insane to watch, but when you see someone who truly gets it, who really learns how to navigate that gearbox, it is really special to watch. And I will challenge all of your listeners. Again, I'm going to throw an arbitrary number out there. 99.99% of the people listening to this podcast don't know how to access gears 1 and 2. And if they want to challenge me on that, I will let them come down and show me for free. I will prescribe something for them to do in 15 minutes, and they can show me they can do it, and I won't even charge them for it. And if they're wrong, they'll learn something about it. And if they're right, I'll give them a pat on the bum and tell them, hey, great job. Go win. Go chase greatness.
Oh, well, there you go, guys. Like, if you want to take Cam up on that challenge, I challenge you to, and tag us in it. I want to see.
Yeah, double challenge.
In saying that though, like you are speaking of the gearboxes, and we had a swim coach, Rob Moon, wonderful man, taught me so much about sport and swimming in general, but just, yeah, about life. And he actually said, you've got to do this at gear 1 or gear 2. And he used to tell us exactly what gears. And I guess because we were semi racing at a state/national level, but we were all semi new to that training. So we'd come in and we'd be like, oh yeah, like 200-meter warm up. Great. Let's go at gear 5, like you said. But no, he said, no, this is at gear 2 to 3. You started at gear 2 and you finish it at gear 3. And being able to switch those gears, and then even like in terms of in the pool, target times that we would do. For example, like I knew my gear 5 is obviously my max effort. It's faster than my max effort. It's, you know, if I'm going gear 5, I'm getting PBs if I'm to do what I want to do. And then gear 4 was, you know, plus a second. Gear 3 was plus 2 or 3 seconds. Gear 2 was maybe plus 5 to 7. And then gear 1 was plus 5 seconds or whatever it is. And we'd have those times and dedicate it. But being able to transfer that to another sport, I couldn't do it. Don't ask me how to do it when I run. I have 2 gears. I have running and I have walking.
And walking, yeah. That's most people I work with. Yeah, they don't understand how to regulate it. And when I teach, like, I'll teach you right now that there's 2 principles that underpin any adaptation. You've got intent and intensity. Intent is the attention that you can dedicate, or I guess the resources that you can dedicate to a stimulus. And the intensity is the resources that you actually have to dedicate to a stimulus. So intent is how much do you want to dedicate to this, because, you know, you've got to be able to concentrate on it for long enough to get it, but not too long that you're impairing the stimulus, because that's going to impair the adaptation. And then how much, like, show me physiologically that you can dedicate that many resources to it. Because if you can't, I have to step in and I have to microdose it for you, which is essentially my job, right? So you look at learning how to navigate a gearbox, and it starts with understanding intent and intensity. If you can't concentrate on running slow, you'll never run slow. And then as you get tired, you'll speed up, which seems to be counterproductive to people that want to run efficiently. Again, come back to endurance athletes. Of all the endurance athletes that I've worked with, and I've probably worked with over 20 in the last 5 years, they all come to me because they want to get better at running. None of them need to run more, yet all they do is run. Everything they do about their training is based around running. They've got to get Ks into the legs. That's one of the biggest myths that I've blown out of the water in the last 5 years. And it's been blown out of the water again and again in the last 5 years with science. Got to get Ks in the legs. Bullshit. You don't need to get Ks in the legs. You need to get high quality Ks in the legs. You need to learn how to regulate your gearbox so that when you're getting those Ks in the legs, you're not running at gear 4 and 5. Because if you're running at gear 4 and 5, you're getting a high stimulus, but you're not getting the adaptation out of the stimulus because you've already adapted to it. You can run. And I had a girl that came to me and said, oh man, I get pain at like kilometer 60 when I'm running, and I need to be able to run this friggin' 65 kilometer thing, and I get pain. And I said, well, what do you want me to do? Like, walk with you until you get to 60 kilometers and then see why you're getting pain? She goes, yeah, well, I don't know what I need to do. I need to show you what I'm doing when I run 60 kilometers. And I just don't know how to do it. And I was like, it's easy. I'll put you on an assault bike for 20 minutes. Then let's go for a 1 kilometer run. Sure enough, you know, we make her tired and we don't have to run 60 Ks, which proves that it's not about Ks in the legs. It's about resource management. And then when I showed her, I was like, mate, you're making so much noise. I can hear you. And I'm about 5 meters away. I can hear you as if you're next to me. I can hear you as if you're running on my head. So then we learned about more efficient running strategies, low-level running strategies that she could adopt into her training. And wouldn't you know it, she hasn't had pain since, because she's not running at gear 5 and 6 or bloody 10 when she's doing her training. She's running at gears 1 and 2. When we train on the assault bike, she's training at gears 1 and 2. And I teach them how to do that by prescribing the assault bike at the start of their session. And then there are strength coaches that will listen to this and go, that's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. Yeah, it is, if they don't know how to regulate their gearbox. If they know how to go through gears 1 and 2, the assault bike is a gentle warm-up. If they don't, the rest of their session's really friggin' hard.
Mm-hmm.
And that proves my point. If they get off the assault bike and say, how did that feel? And they go, yeah, good. And then they can't do the rest of their session effectively. I say, let's have a learning moment. Was the assault bike as good as you said it was? Because objectively, all of your numbers have gone down. What do we need to work on? We need to work on your understanding of intent and intensity, or I've missed something. And it could be with the girls, it could be a menstrual cycle that's come a little bit early. And I sit there and say, hey, let's have a candid conversation about this. I'll pull up their program. I've got dates on there. I track everything and say, when are we due? We're due in the next couple of days. And they go, oh, I'm a bit cranky. I'm a bit grumpy. Might be the next few days. Great. Hormones that are blamed for this. Or not. Let's not say the word blame. Hormones responsible for this performance change.
Yeah.
So let's take into account. And in a week's time or 5 days time or however many days until we do the session again, we're going to prescribe the same session, the same weights, the same load and reps. I want you to show me that you can regulate the session. Show me you can own it, and then we can prescribe more. And they always do. They always come back and say, I'm ready. They don't sit there and go, I'm bored of this session and need something different. They say, this is the challenge in front of me. This is the obstacle.
Mm-hmm.
And I need to show Cam and I need to show myself that I can get through this session and I can do it with efficient and effective movement patterns so that at the end, I can get it ticked off and we move on to the next thing. And when they understand that, it's not about, oh, I'm bored of this session or I need to be training more. It's, all right, I'll show Cam that I can do it. And when he sees I can do it, he will find the right dose for me and then we will move forward together. And that's really, really powerful. But it doesn't happen if you don't know how to regulate the gearbox. And that's my job, is to teach people how to regulate the gearbox. If they can't regulate it, they're not paying attention, or I'm a shit coach. I'm not going to say I'm not a shit coach, because I'm not going to put myself on that pedestal, but I might have missed something. If I've missed something, then they're not going to learn it. So I've got to constantly juggle my way through that spectrum of, am I doing the wrong thing? Have I missed something? Or is this person just not able to refine their attention to the details I'm asking them to refine them to? If that's the case, then I've got to be a better coach. If I've missed something, I've got to be a better coach. It's a really easy, simple solution that way. Like, I just look at it and go, how can I be better for this person? Am I missing something, or are they missing something? If they're missing something, I need to find a way to help them understand it. I need to be a better coach. But that's one of the things that that I would encourage everyone to consider. Are you training at an intensity that replicates your sport? If you are, you might be training too hard. Like, you might be training at a point where you're not getting any adaptation, or not an enriched adaptation. So you might benefit from learning how to train at a lower intensity, which will be a challenge in itself. It'll either be a mental challenge or it'll be a physiological challenge, but it'll be a challenge.
I like that. And I think the work that you're doing to, again, develop the athlete, develop their personality, but more so pull it back and go, no, this person's a human, and that holistic picture really does benefit them in, yes, the short-term goal of whatever it is. It could be the 16-year-old who wanted to do footy, or it could be the long-term goal of being a healthy human and a healthy adult and, living a fulfilling life. But has there been a project that you've been involved in where, you've been able to use your tools and your knowledge to develop the community?
One thing that I was really proud of for my short time there was when Tyab Football Club started up a girls football program, and the coach, Matt Dimkos, at the time, he asked me to come on as an assistant coach because I just had a different way of thinking about football that we used to really resonate about over at the gym, and we used to talk about it a lot. So when I came on, he asked me to help get the girls up to a level where, their running wasn't going to be taking away from their time in the training sessions that they were doing twice a week. He didn't want them just doing running, but he also he understood that they needed to do some running, because if they didn't, they weren't going to be match ready for the first preseason game against Pearcedale. I'll never forget that game. And so what we did for about 8 weeks was I did a little bit of maximal aerobic speed testing, just some really light stuff. And then I started prescribing that MAS within the training session. So they would do some drill stuff. Then they would all run over to a designated group that they were a part of. It was either an A, B, or C group. And then it had a specific distance that they had to run in 15 seconds. But they were microdosing their running, and it felt like they weren't doing anything. And I even had the captain at the time, Katie, come up to me and say, I don't think we're running enough. And I was like, please trust me. I get what your fear is. And you can do all the running you want after this, but you're getting plenty of running. Just focus on getting the girls' skills up, because when they get tired, the skills go out the window. We don't want the skills to drop off. We want the buffer to be the fatigue that we're trying to stave off. And we're doing that with the running. And then towards the end of those sessions, I would do something called a yabby net, which, because they were the Thai yabbies. And I did something called a yabby net, which is all the girls would get in a big fight circle. It was sick. And I would put a bib on every second girl. So there was like a fluoro bib on every second girl. And I'd put a football in the middle and pick someone out, say jump on in. And then so they'd either have a bib or they would. And I'd say, you get to pick your opponent. That opponent comes in, they wrestle over the ball for 30 seconds on their knees. And every time they handball the ball out to somebody that's of their color, that team gets a point. And the yabby net was really effective at doing two things. It was off legs conditioning. So they were learning to get scrappy on the ground, and they were spending time on the ground, because that's where girls footy was spent most of the time when I was watching it. It was spent mostly on the ground because the skills weren't quite there yet. So they were building a skill around getting scrappy on the ground. They were building handball coordination, and they were building handball coordination under pressure. But the beauty of it, I took from something I learned in Japan, which was called a shark tank, that I did in some jiu-jitsu with my Aikido guys. And that's where you have to stay out in the middle of the circle for 10 minutes, and you have 10 1-minute rounds against a fresh opponent after every minute. And that opponent, when they come in, they get to put you in whatever position they want to put you in within reason. And then you just have to struggle and suffer and not die for 10 minutes. And every time you tap, it took away from your score. It was just this arbitrary score. So I was getting the girls to sit in there for 30 seconds, and each girl would stay in there for 2 minutes. So they'd have 4 opponents. And we'd spend 20 minutes doing it, and it was so much fun. And the girls would build awesome little rivalries, so that, we'd have one girl, Kylie, and I'd say, Kylie, you're up. And she'd point at the girl that beat her last week and go, get in here. I'm fresh as a daisy. We're going at it. And it was awesome to watch. And then when we played our first game against Pearcedale, I think at halftime, the score was something ridiculous, like 60 or 70-4, or something even less than that. And girls at halftime, Pearcedale girls, when they came back out, they looked like they didn't want to be there. And every single time the Tayo girls were going hard at the ball or putting the Pearcedale girls down, we were bouncing back up, and we were already on the ball, moving the ball, and the passages of play were really clean and crisp, because the skills were there from what Matt had been refining. But the Pearcedale girls were like rolling over on the ground and slowly getting up, because they just didn't want to get up. Every time they got up, they got hammered. And it was something special to watch, because I was sitting there kind of like smiling, thinking this is great to see. But I also felt a little bad, because I'm like, shit, we've created some serious monsters. And then circumstances arose where I had to step away from that team for the I think the last half of the season. But they went on to win the grand final in their first season, which was awesome. And like, I'm certainly not taking any credit for it, because Matt did all the work. But I couldn't help sit back and be really proud of watching the girls week in and week out go in and just crush everyone. And even a couple of teams that were particularly skilled, like they'd played a lot of football in the past, they were going up against them, and they were like, I think the tie-up girls had a list of maybe 60 or 70% of girls that had never played football before. They were learning the game as they played it. They were putting up a really strong fight against teams that were, that had cemented teams in the women's football league around the peninsula and stuff for a really long time. So it was awesome to watch, and that made me feel really not just proud of my input, but also proud that I fell back on the principles and I stuck to them, even when I was constantly being pressured and told by people that I needed to be doing more. I had the support of Matt, and I even had the support of Katie as well, but there was so much pressure being put on me from a lot of different people saying, you need to be doing more, you're not doing enough. And I thought to myself, I think we're doing enough, because I'm watching the results play out in front of my eyes, and the girls are playing as a team, and I'm really loving the cohesion. And then in that first preseason game, that was when it all kind of came together. And I just remember looking at Matt at halftime when all the girls went back out and they threw the ball up in the air. I just looked at Matt and I was like, the girls don't want to play. Like, Pearcedale girls don't want to play. They're cooked. Like, they just want to stop. And Matt's like, this is good. Like, you know, it feels good to know that all the work that you put in. I was like, no. This is their work. They did all the work. I just sat there and did some maths. Like, it's easy to do the maths. I didn't get dirty. I kicked a football around and had a muck around. I didn't do running. I didn't do the skills. I didn't do the net. I just came up with these formulas and said, do this. And watching it all unfold was really, really great. Very satisfying moment for me.
Yeah. And those girls, like, spoken to one of them, Darcy Hanson, who was, I can't remember, earlier in season 2, and like the amazing things in the community that they have built. And, you know, you were part of that foundation community is something definitely very special.
Yeah, it feels good to, like, it's a great memory to have, but it's also great to, you know, still be on that fan page and look at the girls and being able to pick out familiar faces still playing, and even seeing girls from that first season that aren't playing anymore but are still active in that community is a really awesome feeling. You know, like, it's great to be able to see that they have built themselves something really special. And even if I was responsible for laying one brick in that foundation, it's awesome to be able to sit back and look at that garden and look at how well it's growing and just feel a sense of pride at them. You know, it's just wonderful to see what they've been able to do in the last 5 years.
Yeah, definitely. And I can't wait to see what they do in the next 5. But speaking of the next 5, where do you see either the future of sport or the future of, you know, the sporting industry, the future of the fitness industry? Where do you see it?
Jeepers.
It's
what
a
a
big
rabbit
loaded
hole.
question, isn't it?
Yeah, the future of, I've got an interesting idea around the future of sport, which is very contentious, but it would actually be regulating performance enhancement drugs, because I have been reading a lot of research lately that suggests there's a lot of efficacy around using things like let's use steroids as a broad umbrella term, right? As a pre-surgery and a post-surgery rehabilitation tool, not just in terms of getting an athlete back to playing the sport quicker, but in terms of longevity of the tissue, because we're seeing significant re-injury rates, and we still do. Like, let's use ACL as an example. 1 out of 4 ACLs. I think that's what the 3 out of 4 ACLs. 75% ACLs are non-contact, so they're jumping and landing or changing direction based. And of those, a significant number are women, right? So right off the bat, that says to me that there is a physiological load being imposed on women's tissue that just isn't able to withstand the force that's being put into that. Now, that could be so many different things. It could be low level of time playing the sport, which happened with football when we started introducing female football leagues. A lot of soft tissue injuries and ACLs were being reported because not many people played football, and now they play football. It could be body composition related. It's no secret that there are bigger girls playing football. I love it. And they hit friggin' hard. But at the same time, that's a lot of mass accelerating and having to decelerate. And I watched hamstring and knee and Achilles injuries for half a season on both sides, and it was heartbreaking. But at the same time, you can't step in and say, hey, we have to regulate this, because that's unfair, and it's actually discrimination, and it shouldn't be tolerable. But that is a physiological realization we have to meet. And it could also be, you know, some sort of accident. You know, you get hit or from a different direction, or you have to respond to maybe someone landing on someone's foot, which was something I had to deal with recently with someone's ankle. So these things occur. Now, that's not my issue, because, you know, injuries suck, shit happens, life goes on, we rehabilitate. My issue comes from the re-injury rates, which are still alarmingly high. And that tells me one of two things: either the people going back to sport after they've rehabilitated, they weren't ready, or we're really shit at our job as a strength and conditioning, or as a health and fitness industry, as a clinical and coaching industry, we're really shit at our job. We either missed something, or the person went back and they weren't ready. Either way, that's on us as the coaches. Now, there's a lot of really interesting science that's coming through that suggests that, you know, the use of umbrella term steroids helps with tissue reintegration, because it helps in terms of increasing your recovery rate. Like, you're trying to get some more protein synthesis happening at the site, but not in terms of a return to sport timeline. I would rather just see it as let's make sure we've we've ticked off all the boxes. And if that means, we take a 9-month turnaround injury for most ACLs and we turn that into a 12 to 16 month to ensure that there aren't any more performance enhancements in the system, fine. But at least it's, from a health perspective, something we could consider maybe employing, particularly at a higher level, because the sports are getting faster. They're getting so much more faster, and they're so much more violent, so much more aggressive. And I love watching it. We all love watching how much more athleticism people can squeeze out of themselves. But with that increased rate of force comes a greater demand of force absorption, and the bodies of some of these people aren't able to tolerate it. That's fine, but then they go back and they re-injure and they re-injure. And you see that in a lot of later stage career athletes. Like, to throw an example out there, Dale Morris from Western Bulldogs in 2000, probably 17 or 18. That was his last year. He injured his hamstring. Oh no, sorry, he injured his ACL, and then he came back in his last year and he was forced to retire early because he did his ACL again. I know the person that handled his rehab personally, and I'm not suggesting for a minute that he missed anything, because I know his systems, I know his principles, and they're rock solid. But what I am suggesting is that Dale Morris wasn't young, and it might have just been one of those things where it's like the body can't handle it anymore, which is fine. But now what's on the docket for Dale Morris for the rest of his life? He's had 2 knee reconstructions and he's in his late 30s. That's pretty shit. So is there something that we could have done after that first reconstruction to maybe support longevity of Dale Morris as an athlete for the rest of his life? Or do we have to consider the fact that, maybe those first initial injuries as a cut point when you say, hey, you're X amount of years old and we have to weigh up the risks? I don't know. All I know is the future of sport is going to get a lot faster, a lot more impact, and exciting, but we need to think of better ways to prepare our athletes. Otherwise, we're going to keep having the same problems, which is recurring injury rates. I think the last statistic I read was like 3 out of 10 people go back to sport after they have an ACL injury. 3 out of 10 will go back to sport. So that means that 7 out of 10 don't, and there's a significant number of people that do want to go back to sport, but they just don't go back from whatever it is. Could be, they just don't want to play anymore. It could be fear. But of those 3 out of 10, I think there's a 55% chance of re-injury, and there's a more, like, a bigger chance of injuring the other side. So that's crazy. Like, how are we having these re-injury rates, and sometimes not even on the same side as the initial injury? Like, is it because we're just strengthening one side, ignoring the other? So those are things that, plague my mind all the time. But the future of sport is definitely exciting, particularly with a lot of younger athletes adopting, strength and conditioning and performance principles. I'm just nervous for the clinical side of things. I really wouldn't mind seeing the clinical side of things catch up a bit.
Yeah. And at the end of the day, like, we're starting to talk about, I guess, the last 5 to 10 years about sports psych and how important the role of sports psych is in making sure that an athlete is not just an athlete, but is a person as well. But like, how do we leave their bodies at the end of their career, at the end of their professional career? And that's, I guess, what you're talking about is, well, yeah, it's all well and good that they had 2 knee recos before the age of 40. But what is this man going to be doing when he's 70? Like, is he going to even be able to walk?
The hard thing as well is that, with these later aged athletes in this last era, their whole identity is based around the sport. They didn't have the opportunities to go to university like a lot of the younger athletes do now, where they do a part-time degree and they are playing a full-time sport. They leave the sport with nothing. Fraser Gehrig from St Kilda was the guy that laid the turf. What's his business? Laid the turf at Virtus, which was great to see that he was doing something, but it's not Fraser Gehrig out there on his hands and knees laying turf, because I'm pretty sure his body can't handle the rigors of that. So, you think to yourself, well, what are they capable of doing now that they can't play sport anymore and they've got a bodgy knee? I've hurt my knee 16,000 times. I've never had surgery on it, thankfully. It still hurts from time to time, and I don't sport. The only reason I'm able to put up with it, I guess, is because it's just one of those things where I think, well, this is the job. But do we just accept that, that aches and pains are part of the job, or do we have to sit there and say, maybe there's a better way? I don't know the answer to it, but I think the future of sport is going to revolve somewhere around that answer. And yeah, I mean, it could only make the sport better.
That's it. Yeah. And I hope it does have a positive. And I think the way that we're moving at the moment anyway is going to show that the athlete is not just an athlete, they're a person. So I do see the future of sport being not holistic as in a fluffy holistic, but I do see it to take the whole picture into consideration.
Yeah, I hope so. I really do. Because otherwise I'm just going to keep being this jaded, grumpy old coach wondering why I feel like I'm walking around with blinkers on. It's insane to watch. I mean, if you look at CrossFit as another quick example, there's at least once a year, there's some athlete that gets caught taking performance enhancing drugs. Fine. I don't care, whatever. It's not my sport. People get invested in emotionally. That's fine. But when you put money on the line or prestige on the line, people will start to cut corners. People will start to look for the edge. I feel like if we're going to be doing that, we might as well just regulate the whole system and say, hey, if you want to jump into a sport that is regulated in this way, but you want to see what you can do, then go for it. Here is all the research that shows what happens to your body when you put yourself through this shit. But don't sit there and do it and pretend like you're not, and then get caught doing it and then sit on your high horse and say sorry. Hindsight's a bit, and it's always 2020. If you want to do it, do it. But let's set aside a sport specifically for you, and let's see if you can really juice that lemon for all of its worth. If you can't, or you don't want to, then you have to cop the consequences when you get caught. So don't sit there and say this is shit. But with CrossFit, I have this jaded view when I look at the CrossFit Games, and I think some of these athletes, their training loads are phenomenal, physiologically very demanding. And then, you only have to go back 6 or 7 years and look at some of them and look at the changes in their body. And you think, I don't know if 365 days of training a year makes someone look like, I don't know if that's the case. If I'm wrong, I'm happy. I don't know. And then everyone always jokes about, oh yeah, they're all roided up. I don't know if they are, but then some top 10 guy or girl comes out and gets caught exposed, and you think, well, maybe not, and you don't know, but they're all quick to sort of jump on each other. And I just think to myself, fuck it, lift the veil, just do it. If you want to do it, then do it. But be aware of the consequences, because there's a consequence for everything. And if that's the case, it'd make for a really exciting sport. And then you wouldn't have any questions. You wouldn't be sitting there saying, hey, I wonder who isn't. You'd sit there and go, the greatest athletes of all time, and they're putting their bodies through tremendous torture for our enjoyment, which is what people do anyway. That's what AFL football, that's what netballers do. It's what weightlifters do. They put their body through torture for our enjoyment. I don't know. Maybe that's the future of sport. It's not a common, it's not a commonly agreed upon thing, but again, I'm just at that stage in my career. I'm like, why not? It'd be fun to watch. If people are doing it anyway, it'd be fun to watch.
And it's not the first time I've heard that, and I haven't heard it in the context of CrossFit before, but I have heard it in the context of cycling, and probably a bit more broad known is obviously all the scandals that happened in the late 90s and early 2000s. Everyone know Lance Armstrong, like household name, but like they were all doing it, and it was just no one was talking about it.
Yeah, that's the consensus, is that, it came out that everyone was doing it. So then why didn't Lance get ahead of it when someone said, hey, we think this, and he just turned and go, well, yeah, you're right, but we're all doing it. And then it would have been a completely different story than him sitting there saying, no, 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 no. And then Oprah comes along and says, did you do it? Yeah. Like, what the fuck? Like, why do we care that Oprah is the one that gets it out of him? The guy lied about it, so he should be punished. But at the same time, don't just sweep everything else under the rug. Let's look at it all. And then you watch that Netflix doco, Icarus, where, that guy puts his literal life on the line and says, let me show you how it's done. And then he does it. And then he objectively shows you the performance enhancing result. And people are still sitting there going, oh yeah, but I don't know if it's everyone. I'm like, well, who knows if it is or isn't, because we don't know. But if you want to lift the veil, you just say, hey, go at it. Everyone gets bloods done every month. They're not to test whether you're on it or not. They're to test your health. Because if you want to sacrifice your health for this, then go for it. But understand that's the cost of glory, and it would make for a hell of an exciting sport to watch, because you're sitting there not going, who is and who isn't. The same thing happened with Contador. Like, he came out and said he's not. And then they poured out his bloods and said, well, these bloods say you are. And he goes, that's not mine. And then they did a urine sample. He's like, that's not mine. And then they did a urine B sample. He's like, okay, that's mine.
Yeah.
Of course, it was yours the whole time, dude. It's just so frustrating. I just, that's what I mean. I'm a grumpy old man. I sit there and go, why don't we just, if you want to do it, then don't do it in a way that's cheating. Just do it in a way that's regulated. And then wouldn't you know it, everyone's going to be doing the same thing, and we're going to be seeing a whole different class of sport. But and that's not a very commonly shared opinion, which is, I mean, it's not really my fault.
It might not be commonly shared, but you're allowed to have your own opinion, and it's valid to what you've experienced. And I don't know how I would feel if I was clean, in air quotation marks, athlete, and everyone else was doping. Like, I would want to know, yes, what would my body be capable of naturally? But at the same time, the first thing I do in the morning is reach for that cup of coffee. So,
which is a performance enhancing drug. Yeah,
exactly.
It's incredible, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
And it's the same when we talk, like, you'll look at an AFL footballer and they'll cop a stinger and they'll come off, right? And they get put some analgesic cream on it or some analgesic spray. That's changing the nociceptive properties of that tissue.
Mm-hmm.
The body said, I can't perform this task anymore because I've sustained tissue damage. And then the physio or the doc sprays or injects something in, and then, oh, hey, presto, there's no pain anymore. That's performance enhancing. By very definition, you've enhanced the performance. And then, oh, that player's back out again. That's a health hazard, but no one bats an eye at it because it might be the best player in the team and need to win. Fine. But if we're going to go down this path, I'm telling people it's a slippery road. And when we turn around and start talking about the dreaded steroid, I'm thinking, hey, there's a lot of science to suggest the efficacy of this drug, this performance enhancing drug, as a tissue solidifier, as something that helps restore and improve that protein synthesis through the tissue. There is a lot of science and validity to suggest that this isn't a taboo method, and it could be a viable health strategy for people. But it's performance enhancing. So you have to decide, where do we lay on this, or like, where do we fall on this? And it's easy for a lot of people to sit on the couch and watch sport to go, no, won't have it in my sport. It's not your sport. You don't play it. You watch it and you don't get a say. If you don't want to watch it, then don't watch it, but it's not your sport. It's their sport. I sit between the two, and I have to constantly volleyball between the two and say, hey, it's not your sport, it's their sport. By the way, this person's opinion is different to yours. They play it. You can't irrefute their point of view because they are in it. They're the gladiator getting swung at. So they're the one that gets to decide. But at the same time, you have to have regulating bodies as well.
And how much effort's going to go into that. Yeah, very, very interesting. And I'm very grateful that I'm not responsible for regulating it, to be honest.
Me too. Me too.
Oh, well, Cam, thank you so much for joining us today. I really, really appreciate your time and the knowledge and the wisdom.
Thank you. I guess I try my best to add value if I can. Sometimes I get on little tangents.
No, I liked them. And my favorite one is the gearbox. So I'm going to be talking about the gearbox for the next few weeks.
Awesome. Practice the gearbox, especially when you're doing your running.
Yeah. Thank you for listening to this episode of Beyond Sport with Fiona Stewart. This is a completely independent podcast that has been created to share the journey and lessons of top-level sporting professionals, but also your everyday lover of sport. If you liked this podcast, I'd really appreciate if you could leave a review and share it with someone who you think would also enjoy it. Until next time.